Alright everyone, welcome back to the channel. This is a review of my new motorcycle. It is branded as a BOOM BD125-2. It is essentially a Honda S90 clone from the 1960s, except this is brand new. I bought this about 6 weeks ago. It's registered and fully street legal with a horn, lights, and even has a speedometer in miles per hour. So super cool. It was relatively cheap. I think after everything was said and done, this isn't counting your state's taxes, of course, but just to buy it off of Amazon.com, this cost me $1,539 US. But yeah, I really like it. It is the cafe style. It does have kind of scrambler type handlebars, but of course we have street tires, front and rear, chain drive, 125cc 4-speed manual with a clutch. You got mirrors, the whole works. Basic carburetor, I believe it is a PZ, if you will. PZ17, it looks like. It could be a 19. I'd have to double check. But yeah, super basic. You have a petcock here, one on the tank as well. Also have an evap canister to make this 50 state legal. Kickstart, but it is very, very difficult to kick over. So I just use the electric start. But yeah, it is a pretty cool bike. Spoke wheels, drum brakes, mechanical drum, not hydraulic, front and rear. Yeah, enough talking. Let's get to riding. Alright, time to go riding. And then this should be up. Choke, it's pretty warm today, so I don't... Oh boy, I cannot see shit. There we go. I'm looking through the camera, so of course I'm getting this in a half-second delay. But yeah, pretty easy to start. Just doing half choke, crack throttle a little. And we're sitting about 85 to 90 degrees outside, so yeah, we won't need that choke for long. But yeah, super comfortable position for riding. You do sit fairly forward on the seat. There is room in back for a passenger if you scoot up. The rear shocks are quite stiff, so it's definitely going to be able to handle the weight of an extra passenger in most cases. But yeah, let's go for a little ride. You can see first gear is quite short. And it gets buzzy around there. Second, third, and this starts getting buzzy around 25. Hopefully you guys can hear me with the wind. So I'll even go into fourth around 25 to 30 a lot of times. This is not a highway motorcycle. In fact, first gear is pretty much just crawling. I'll show you. I can start in second. Clutch engage is a little late towards the top, but as you can see, that's starting in second. And I've had a couple of highway bikes where first gear isn't that short, so it's definitely in the mini moto category, but it's a relatively large bike for a mini moto, so you can ride it around as a adult just fine. I was riding around with my friends on it last night, taking turns. Some of them over 6 feet tall, over 200 pounds, and it had enough power to pull them just fine, and they weren't super cramped. I'm 5'7", my knees are hugging the tank here, but I'm not bent up weird or anything. I'm not hitting handlebars at all, not even close. So Yeah, it's definitely sized for adult riders. Just a little in-town run-around bike. It's a lot of fun. I like it. I like motorcycles that don't take things too seriously, you know? A lot of people take, their sport bikes or their cruisers a little too seriously, in my opinion. And sometimes it's just fun to get out on two wheels and to ride around a little bit. So you can see, I mean, it's no slouch. It does go along quite quickly. If it were, well, it is up to me. I think I may eventually. Woo! It is windy. Apologies for the camera there. It is around that green bin. I caught some wind. We have gusts of 50 miles an hour today, so the fact that I'm even on two wheels is a little iffy. But hopefully you guys can hear me since my mic is inside the helmet. Yeah, this is, I've kind of lost my track. This is a fun little bike. I plan on gearing it a little bit more for highway. They make a lot of different front sprockets for this engine. Many different options. I think it's something like 10 different options for the front sprocket, which sounds insane. I'm sure some of those are for different tooth pitches, whether this goes on a ATV or on a motorcycle. But I'm planning on trying to get another 10 miles an hour out of it on the top. That'd be nice. Because as it sits now, your absolute top speed is 55, which of course you cannot cruise at if you want any sort of longevity. I would say comfortably you can cruise at 40 miles an hour. It starts getting buzzy around 35. 40 is okay. It gets a lot buzzier once you get above 40, which is in line with the red on the speedometer. But yeah, it's a fun little bike. There are, of course, a few things to mention. This bike is built to a price point, and that price point is dirt ass cheap. So there's a lot of things that if you're a regular motorcyclist, or if you like to buy Japanese motorcycles, American motorcycles, Italian, whatever, do not expect that level of quality. There's a lot of shortcuts that are taken in the manufacturing process. In the crate, for example, we'll pull to a stop here, and I'll show you. I might even have some pictures of this. If I do, I'll put them up in the video. In the crate, these 4 bolts for where the handlebars get mounted on are actually used for holding the bike from side to side. That's bolted onto a piece of angle iron. I had to replace this bolt because they just impacted these in real quick, and this is M6 by 1.0 into aluminum. So as you can imagine, that strips out super easily. So I had to tap and die this and put that up to 1/4 inch -20 and put in a larger bolt and then Loctite all 4 of those. And that has solved the problem of loose handlebars. Oh, got a little air there in a second. The front end on this bike, very, very soft. You can hit a bump. If you dive with the brakes, you can totally collapse the front end. Rear end, super stiff on the lowest setting. So I would not say it's ideally set up. I think this is more of a parts bin motorcycle. Eventually I may put a rear set of new rear shocks in that are softer, because the preload is just too much for the 138 pounds that I weigh, and I never carry a passenger, so I don't need that extra spring. But needless to say, for rough numbers, $1,600, you are not going to find, at least in this area, a better bike. Even considering the cheapest used street bikes, we're talking for that kind of money, you get some sort of like early 1980s Japanese bike with CV carbs that are leaking and fork seals that are leaking, and the bike probably hasn't ran in 10 years, and you will spend all summer fixing the bike instead of riding the bike. So I wanted to just ride, because we have really short summers here. We're lucky if we get 2.5 months of decent riding weather, and sometimes it's 1 month. Yeah, you take the days that you can. So I figured cheap new was better than cheap used, and so far that has been true. I was able to take my test, passed my Class M motorcycle license skill test on this bike. It was legal to use it. I have 0 restrictions. I can ride in all 50 states now. Not that I'd want to with this gearing, but I can, which that's a big deal. You can't do that with, like a pit bike or a dirt bike. But aside from that, I mean, this bike still has some pretty good chops. I mean, it's not perfectly set up, but it's fun. The stamped steel frame is it's super rigid. It doesn't feel wallowy at any point. It's just a really solid motorcycle with a few quirks here and there. I mean, another one of those quirks, you can probably hear the headset rattling around. The head bearings were super loose when I got it. We're talking stopping at 20 miles an hour. Lucky I didn't tip the damn thing over. But I mean, whew, it's windy. We'll take a little break here from the wind. That'll give me a time to talk about the controls, but it's not that hard to loosen this nut. And then there's this, I don't know if you can see it, there's a little lock ring you hit with a punch and a hammer, and then you tighten up the head bearings. It's not that bad. I still, as you can see, I mean, most of that's just the suspension compressing, but there's still a little bit of play, so I need to tighten that up. So I mean, if you're not handy with bikes, probably don't get this bike, but I'm guessing if you're watching my channel, you are. So I mean, I like it. Realistically, if I was comparing it to other motorcycles, it would be a 2 out of 5 stars. But I like riding motorized bikes, and this is just kind of basically a step up. This is a small motorcycle. It's essentially a 1960s Honda with modern-day Chinese quality. So I think that really says it all. I mean, you know what you're going to get. You're going to be happy with it. That being said, there are a few weird things, like the key, when you have the handlebars adjusted properly, the key is not going to pull out very well. You have to put it in at an angle because this bar is in the way. Other things that happen, mirrors. Let's talk about mirrors. Mirrors are actually pretty good. You can adjust them well. I have Loctite on them, of course, because one longer. I don't want anything vibrating loose, and they haven't. We have a quick trigger flash for high beam, low beam. That headlight, I'll get off the bike to show you. We can actually turn it off for a second. The headlight, little weird things like this. This is designed to have an incandescent light in it. They've swapped out an LED light that has the light on the top and the bottom. So it's not omnidirectional, so they have this in upside down. You turn on high beams, it's lower than low beams, but it's brighter. So I obviously need to flip this around 180 degrees. Not a big deal. Other things that are annoying. These adjustment bolts. I have this headlight adjusted as low as it can possibly go. It's running into the speedometer cable here. That would need to be notched out if I wanted to get this properly aligned. There's no paint under the rear fender. There is under the front fender because I painted it before I put it on. It's just basic Rust-Oleum enamel and it matches perfectly. That's not a big deal. So, I mean, there's a lot of little things like that. The battery's underpowered. It's about this big. It sits in here. That'll be a problem in colder climates eventually. But, I mean, overall, you have a really nice looking seat that's relatively comfortable. After about an hour, it does get a little uncomfortable on the hard edges, but it's a fun little bike. So, with that, let's keep riding. That's what I'm talking about with that battery. There we go. But overall, I really do like this bike. Mine specifically did come with a little bit of damage. One of my blinkers is cracked. That's not the end of the world. Anything that you get in a crate, something like that is going to happen. Also, my rear wheel is out of true enough where anything over 30 miles an hour, you can feel a bump and back, and that turns into a pretty steady vibration if you try to take this out on the highway. Oh fuck. I always remember to put your kickstand up, which reminds me of my next thing. So I will true this wheel, and I will balance it with a bubble balancer, throw some sticky weights on there, and I'm going to put a new front sprocket on it, and maybe we'll do some highway cruising eventually at 50 miles an hour. The kickstand, that reminds me, it comes with a center stand, which is really convenient for working on it and doing things like tightening the head bearings. However, the spring that it came with is the wrong length, and it was dragging and rattling and being really annoying and rubbing on the tire that was slightly out of true. So I just took it off. And I'm sure a lot of you would do the same. So there's a lot of little things like that, like the brake, for example. There's a cotter pin that holds it onto just a shaft, and that cotter pin is horribly undersized. I replaced it with 4 sizes bigger, and it still had a little bit of play in the hole. Needless to say, I would not trust a cotter pin with the thickness of a sewing needle. So there's little things like that. You might want to upgrade some hardware here and there. For the same reason, I took off the passenger pegs in rear, because it was just annoying listening to those cotter pins rattle around, because they were horribly undersized, and I never carry a passenger, so who cares? All the pegs do is get in the way. So overall, I mean, it was a little bit of a bumpy start with the manufacturer, but overall, I mean, I'm still pleased with this. It's not a bad price for what you get. You get a rock solid engine. Granted, I've only put like 50 miles on it so far, but I mean, it starts every time. It runs perfectly. It does not skip a beat. The chassis feels good. It just has a few things here and there that are annoying. Like, I mean, eventually the threads start getting damaged when you loosen that nut a bunch to make more steering adjustments, and you have to take the handlebars off every time you adjust that. I might build a specialty tool, though, something like a distributor wrench, to make it easier. But it's just little things like that. Overall, I mean, it is... I got the MCO. I was able to register it. This is a legal motorcycle entirely. This is a street bike. That is awesome. That does not happen for this price point. Other things that are a little annoying. This wears in as you use it more, but the clutch, the engagement point, it's better now, but it was basically at, like, I can maybe still do it. Yeah, that's all you got to do. I mean, it is really, really touchy. You're only using maybe the first 5 degrees of this. I'm just clenching it all the way down out of habit. But with that, if you're a new rider and you are trying to put your clutch in all the way, gotta watch for traffic here, and you don't time your throttle properly because you expect it to start releasing way down here, it's pretty easy to do a wheelie in the beginning. This throttle is touchy, the clutch is touchy, so keep that in mind. I mean, granted, it's only 8 horsepower, so I mean, it's gonna come down immediately. It's not like like you're driving like an R6 or something and you're going to be riding wheelies for days or going over backwards, but I mean it's enough to spook you. So I mean it's a little touchy. The low speed technical stuff is it's not super easy like you would expect on a bike like this, but yeah, there's a good shift, a good example of how really you just need to barely two finger to switch. But I mean, it's still a really good bike. I will take it out on the highway just so you guys can see the shake that I'm talking about. I'm not going to go out there long at all. But I just think you guys should be able to see that. And it's on my way to my destination, so. Oh, other thing that's kind of weird. There's a lot of room on this throttle, which kind of goes along with the small carburetor. Smaller carburetor, you have to open the slide further, which it is a mechanical slide, not a CV. So yeah, you actually have to, like, I'll simulate. You have to go down to here to get full throttle, where I'm used to being going to here. So you might think the bike is slow until you actually get full throttle, and then it's a whole nother experience. The power to weight ratio isn't bad. It only weighs 190 pounds dry. This is wide open. Okay, that's top gear. You can see it's very buzzy at this speed, and we're getting the shake. So that's what you guys could see. I wouldn't consider this a highway bike. I don't know if I would consider this a major street bike either, if you have a 50-mile-an-hour zone. It definitely could benefit from some regearing, but I like it. And, you know, for cruising around this little town, it's not bad. Granted, I don't know if I'd be revving it up that high all the time. What do we call that, break-in riding? But, yeah, I mean, it's fun. The mirrors get buzzy at about 25 miles an hour, so the mirrors are good until they're not, I guess I should say. But there's a lot of things that go with a cheaper bike like this. I still think this is a lot better choice than, like, throwing lights on a pit bike. I think it's a better choice than getting a crappy used motorcycle that you can never ride. Is it perfect? No. Let's see what else I can think about. The rear brake squeaks a little bit. It's just kind of a drum thing. It has a locking gas cap, which is interesting. Fuel tank size. The book claims a couple of different numbers. It claims 5 liters or 10 liters, which, translating that to US gallons, 1.5 gallons or 2.5 gallons. It seemed more like 2.5 while I was filling it up, but I didn't measure, to be honest, but it used a lot out of a 5-gallon gas can. Claimed MTG is 85 miles to the gallon, so this sucker will last you a long time. This has a decent range. Even if we do only have the 5-liter tank, we're talking a range of, 130 miles for a little city bike like this. Not terrible. If it is actually the 2.5 gallons, which I believe it is, we're probably looking at, another 100 on top of that, or another 85 at very least. It is a relatively large tank for something this efficient, to be honest. But yeah, it's just a lot of fun. And it's kind of a hooning bike, It wants to go 1 speed, and that speed is fast. If you drive it slow, it'll be herky-jerky. The fueling's not great off the line. It doesn't like to hold a constant speed necessarily, because it is not a CV carb, which we always complain about for rebuilding, but for actual street use, they're a lot better. But yeah, it's the carburetor feeling's almost too strokey, if I had to say so. Not that that says anything about how the engine's designed, but yeah, I think you catch my drift of you're constantly changing RPMs. But yeah, overall it's just a lot of fun. Oh, and downshifts are super easy, super crisp. I've never locked up the rear wheel. And I always turn this off just in case, because I had a Tao four-wheeler once that would always get milky oil if you didn't do that. So that's just a habit. Yeah, that is my 2021 BOOM BD125-2. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, subscribe. I have some motorized bike builds, other small bike things. Also, give us a thumbs up if you like the video. Leave a comment if you have any questions about the bike. Maybe I'll answer them for you. And that's all we got for today. Have a great weekend, guys, and see you next time.